Hi, welcome. So this is my first video for Crystal Rooms of Refuge. And just to explain sort of where I'm coming from with this, I'm a writer. I've been writing since I was a kid, and I'm a published writer. And regardless of your political party allegiances, there's a lot of political tension. A lot of the things that I write about, one of the themes tends to be politics or political nightmares more appropriately. And that's always fascinated me since I was a child. I do have a degree in political science, multiple degrees in political science, and a law degree. So politics just intellectually is always here on the surface of my brain, but creatively, I work through a lot of the questions that we often have about politics um, through poetry, through short stories, through a novel that I'm currently working on, and past novels that I have worked on and completed. So this is meant to sort of be, like the name implies, a refuge from a lot of the political tension and social tension that many of us are experiencing in our society right now. Most of this focuses on poetry and prose, either stuff that I have written or by authors that I've sort of stumbled upon um, in the current events, or books that I just return to and I'm like, you know what? George Orwell had a really great passage that I think applies to this moment. But I think the important part is that through literature, we can better process our current environment. It also gives us a place to go to, a room of refuge, where we kind of get lost in the language. And I do feel strongly that creativity, art, helps us deal with uh, emotions and frustrations that we might be experiencing. But I also strongly believe that literature and art can spur change and it transforms society. And for example, I'll give you Charles Dickens. Writing in Victorian England, the Industrial Revolution, terrible things were going on culturally in England, child labor, just horrible conditions overall. And he was a very popular writer, and it kind of spurred a lot of change, policy change in England because he was such a popular writer, and he was Queen Victoria loved his writing, and it changed policy in England. So it's kind of where I'm coming from with this particular channel, Crystal Rooms of Refuge. So I have a poem to read, so join me. This is my poem written for Los Angeles in what is just a few days after the fires have finally died due to rain. I will talk more about Los Angeles. I used to live there for about 11 years, and I'm from Southern California, although currently I live in Arizona. So it's extremely sad what has happened in Los Angeles. But anyhow, this is the poem that I wrote. I dug out some old journals from when I was living in Los Angeles, and it inspired me to write this. The poem is entitled There Are Endless Days Here. In little row houses, and little coal towns, and little textile towns, and little fields where only bitter berries grow, there are silken whispers, sanded down by the almighty dollar, whipping through the blustery wind and ringing rain. The voice said, "Go west, young man," a gentle command for a tragic destiny. And so they packed pots for beans, pans for bread, a poor fiddle for nights that shivered with cosmic dust folded by ancient light. One child pointed to the chasm. "Shall we take all that up there as well?" His father, creased with toil, a tributary of wrinkles forming mighty canyons on his face, patted the boy's head. "One day, my young man, one day." And they arrived with their meager treasures, bloody knees, and nightmares of hatchets and arrows. There was a staggering coastline, otters and coves, coyotes playing in the barrancos, hills and mountains bubbling like wax, and shy water afraid to tinkle on the land. Anais Nin, a Parisian bird with a hot mouth, moved to Los Angeles in 1961. She hired Frank Lloyd Wright to design her house. She wrote, "I saw his plans for Los Angeles. It could have been the most beautiful city in the world for everyone to come to see as people went to see Venice. But architecture had been taken over by the businessman. Housing development here, housing development there, take the money, lie to the IRS, get a tax break. Meanwhile, the young man asks, 'But when will the rain come?' No one answered as the men were in the bank or drinking honeyed bourbon at the Brown Derby with Bogart and Gable." Mike Johnson is the 56th Speaker of the House of Representatives. He recently said, or sort of said, "Because your state is weeping blue, melting into shades of sorrow, you must bow to the superior red if you want money for that Los Angeles travesty." End quote. A few days ago, I found a diary I kept while living in Los Angeles many years ago. I didn't think I was happy then. I spent the weekends driving from Melrose to Malibu, Brentwood to Crenshaw, Silver Lake to Santa Monica, and on and on. Loneliness had given me a rash, and I thought others mocked me, and my moods kept spinning and crashing like some hellish carnival ride. But reading my words, I was happy, and happiness is like that. It rarely announces itself. It simply is, like entering heaven without an invitation or angels blaring horns, alerting eternity. This is what I wrote. There are endless days here, times when the sun drowns everything in a wave of white hot light. Those days are melancholy, and life seems to stretch infinitely. There is no hint of death, no respite from want or desire. And then the winds come, sowing harvests of fire. The air fills with smoke. I climb on the roof of my apartment building and watch as the flames feed on the chapel in the hills. And then there are days as clean and crisp as the cracking of ice. Those days wane short and seem fragile. As chimney smoke clouds the frosted mountains, that become uncrowned chocolate mounds free of the powder of snow when the rain ceases. And then there are days as warm as a glass of dark rum, and the ocean swells and sweeps into shore. And then there are days when the sky rips open and floods the basin with water wrenched from ocean storms. And then there are days hazy with smoke and noise, and desolation seems to knock at one's consciousness. And then there are days, so many days. My moods color each one. There's not one season here, but a multitude, as if each voice within me has given birth to a weather pattern or a certain slant of light. There are endless days here. Los Angeles. End of diary entry. There is no more west to vanquish, triumph over. And so they begin again, endlessly, day after day. One brick, one stone, pour concrete, repeat. My diary today. Do not conquer yourself, liberate yourself. Paradise is under your feet, but mostly it's in your soul. So today is January 28th, 2025, and the rains have come to Los Angeles, so the fire is finally extinguished everywhere. But I read an article today. It came through Reuters, and I believe it was also on CNN and MSNBC. Homeowners, a lot of them in these burn areas, are underinsured. They're underinsured to the point where it's either $500,000 or $1 million, which is tragic. This is going to really stall rebuilding in Los Angeles. Some people are going to leave. Some people are going to end up out here like I did when I left over 10 years ago in Arizona. I'm not here to say anything bad about Arizona, but it's usually a refuge for a lot of Californians leaving high rates, outrageous mortgages, outrageous rents. But it's particularly terrible to learn when I read that article this morning that so many people are underinsured and they may not be able to rebuild where their house once stood. Additionally, Peris, that Southern California Edison, the electric company, which I definitely remember from childhood and all the way straight through the over a decade that I lived in Los Angeles itself, can be difficult to work with. And part of the responsibility for the fires lies with them because they either didn't shut off the electricity when they should have, when the wind kicked in, or they didn't bury all the electrical lines. But of course, that's not a complete solution because you can't bury all the electrical lines in Los Angeles. So coupled with this, though, is the government, and I'll say his name, Trump, through Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, have decided to put conditions on federal aid to California. This is really egregious. One, California, I believe last year, paid $83 billion to the federal government. But also, Mike Johnson, let's just take Louisiana. Mike Johnson is from Louisiana. Well, Louisiana, I do believe, is in the bottom 10 nationwide in terms of test scores for students. They also have one of the highest crime rates in the United States. Their crime rate is about 67% higher than the average. So what if the federal government told Mike Johnson, hey, if you want aid for that hurricane that slammed into Louisiana, you better bring up those test scores, or you better lower crime, or we're not going to give you money. The thing is that no president in the past would have said that, Democrat or Republican. And the reason why is it's psycho. It's just psycho. It's insane to put conditions on that. Particularly when California, who could pretty much exist as a country in and of itself, being the fourth largest economy in the world, is basically funding a lot of these red states who end up in a deficit each year. So I just want to conclude with just a very short paragraph from Anais Nin's journals. If you don't know Anais Nin, and I'm really bad at pronouncing her first name. I know I'm not really hitting the mark on her first name, but Anais Nin. I have her name up there so you can look her up. She is this fantastic journalist. She wrote erotica, but she also wrote just pages and pages of journals, and it's just such beautiful writing. A lot of it had to do